let me ask you something. You have probably tried some version of this. Affirmations, visualization, maybe a vision board, maybe you spend time genuinely working on your mindset, telling yourself that what you want is already on its way, that the universe is rearranging itself in your favor, and maybe some of it helped, okay? Or maybe it didn't. But I want to focus on something more specific than whether it worked. I want to focus on the premise, because the manifesting tradition makes a very specific claim about where transforming comes from. It says, your thoughts, and listen to this, your thoughts create your reality. So we know that. We become what we think about, so we know the drill, we know Napoleon, we know all that, so we know the new thought, you know that. So get your mind, if you get your mind right, your life is gonna follow. So your life follows, excuse me. So reprogram your thinking in the external world response. So that's not a vague idea. So that's a claim about the architecture of a human being. It says the mind is in charge. So that's the premise. Your mind is in charge. The mind is the source. So get to the mind and you have gotten the what? The root. Okay, I want you to show you why that's wrong, not slightly off, it's architecturally wrong. Wrong about which part of you is actually running things. And that's only not wrong, not deeply wrong, and also that's the core of our movement, I would say. That's the core of our order, and that's the core of my teachings. And if you like this, if you've been watching this channel, don't forget to subscribe and like the video, okay? And I want to show you that this isn't just my opinion. Every major wisdom tradition that seriously engaged with human transformation arrived at the same conclusion. The mind is not the source. Something deeper is the source. And until you understand the difference between mind and between the source, you can reprogram your thinking forever and still feel like you're steering with the passenger wheel. Okay, before I go further, let me say what's true about the manifesting tradition, because there's something true about it, okay? So, attention shapes us. Concentration is a power, if not our strongest power in this life. It is attention, it is concentration. And I spoke of that in a couple of videos before, that that's Gurdjieff, he said, if all humanity was capable of concentrate in our thumbs for 5 minutes, all our problems will be gone. So where we focus, we tend to move. A person who spends their days rehearsing failure is going to see the world differently than someone who trains themselves to notice what? Possibility. That's not magic. That's cognitive science. And is also what? Pure energy. You put your energy, you put your concentration into something that's probably going to work. That's life, and that's power. Okay? It's Stoic philosophy, it's basic psychology as well. The Stoic understood this 2,000 years ago. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the quality of life is determined by the quality of your judgments, not your circumstances, but your interpretations of circumstances. Change the judgment and you change the experience, okay? So when manifesting coaches say that mental habits shape outcomes, they are pointing at something real. That part is true. So the error isn't in pointing the mind's power. The error is in thinking the mind is the seat of that power. That's where the whole framework goes wrong. Okay, here's an exercise. Sit quietly for 5 minutes. Don't try to control your thoughts. Just watch your thoughts. What you will notice, if you are being honest, is that the mind is not a clean instrument. It's not a tool. You pick it up, aim at a target, and put it down. It's more like a weather system. Thoughts arrive, they contradict each other, they jump, what? Up and down, back and forward. Sometimes something you felt confident about this morning terrifies you what? By afternoon. A voice tells you you are capable. Another voice minutes, sometimes what? Seconds later tells you that you were fooling yourself. You didn't summon either voice. They what? Arrived. So the Buddha has a word for this. Is pampanka. Conceptual proliferation, the mind's compulsive tendency to generate commentary on top of commentary. Taking a simple experience and wrapping it in a layer of interpretation, judgment, fear, and story until you can barely find the original thing underneath. You think a thought and you put a layer, another layer, you judge again, comes a different thought, and another one, and you can barely, sometimes you can't even trace the line of thought to the first thought, and this goes the entire day and goes for years, goes for decades, and goes for sometimes people. I go even further. People spend the wholeness, the completion, the whole life in there, wasting their lives in their thoughts. Okay, the mind is not quiet by default, is not neutral, is not waiting calmly for your instructions. Left to itself, it spirals, it loops, it catastrophizes about things that haven't happened and minimizes things that are staring it in our faces. And this is the instrument. Okay, before I say that, the mind sometimes agonizes for things that will never, ever happen. The mind goes into a spiral of anxiety for things that will never, ever materialize. And this is the instrument the manifesting tradition is asking you to use to reprogram reality. There is a problem here. You can't reprogram the software by telling the software to reprogram itself. That's not how the architecture works. Think about it. This isn't just a philosophical objection, okay? The empirical evidence is pretty damning. Just think. I don't need to explain, but I will. But think for yourself. NYU psychologist Gabriel Oettingen spent over 20 years studying the effects of positive visualization and motivation. What she found was the opposite of what the manifesting tradition predicts. Positive fantasy about future success actually reduced motivation and achievement. People who spent the most time vividly imagining their desired outcome consistently underperformed compared to people who didn't. Why? Because the pleasurable act of imagining the destination gave the brain partial credit for having already arrived. The urgency to actually move, poof, evaporated. Then there's Joanne Wood's research at the University of Waterloo on positive statements. Affirmations. She found that people with low self-esteem repeating positive affirmations didn't help. It made them feel worse. The gap between what they were telling themselves and what some deeper part of them knew to be true created a kind of cognitive dissonance that amplified the problem. Think about that. People who most need the help, the ones with most self-doubt, are the ones the manifesting technique actively harms. And there's a reason for that. Something deeper than the conscious mind knows when it's being lied to, even when the lie is I'm sorry about that. Even when the lie is flattering, even when you are the one telling it. That's something. The part that knows is what I want to talk about. In 1818, a philosopher named a bunch of you know named Arthur Schopenhauer published The World as Will and Representation. It's one of the more uncomfortable books in the Western philosophy because it says something most people don't want to hear. The intellect, Schopenhauer argued, is not sovereign. It's a servant. It serves, drives, impulses, and forces that operate beneath its awareness, and then constructs post hoc justifications for what those forces have already decided. His metaphor for this is precise. The will, he said, is like a strong, blind man carrying a sighted lame man on his shoulders. The lame man, which is the intellect, can see, but he isn't steering. The blind man, the will, is doing all the moving. The intellect gets to observe and narrate, but the actual motion comes from somewhere else. Schopenhauer was writing 100 years before Freud. Freud's entire theory of the unconscious is just basically a footnote to this idea that the conscious mind is not the captain of the ship, but a very well-spoken crew member who has convinced himself he is in charge. This doesn't mean your mind is useless. It means your mind is downstream of something deeper. And the manifesting tradition has confused the downstream for the source. You can tell the water to flow uphill all day. It won't. So here's what I find remarkable about this. Every major wisdom tradition across cultures, across centuries, operating completely independently, drew the same distinction. Not between positive and negative thinking, between the thinking mind itself and something deeper they consistently called the soul. The Stoics called it prohairesis, the faculty of moral choice. Epictetus, who was born a slave and became one of the most influential philosophers in history, built his entire system on this distinction. The thinking mind receives impressions from the world. It's reactive. It gets triggered. It spirals. Prohairesis is the faculty that decides what to do with those impressions. And Epictetus said this faculty is the only thing in the universe that is truly yours. Not your reputation, not your body, not your outcomes. this deeper capacity to choose. The Hindu tradition made the same distinctions. The Atman, the true self, is separate from the Antkarana, the inner mental instrument. The Gita is explicit. The Atman is not born and does not die. It cannot be burned or cut or drowned. It is the witness behind the mind, not the mind itself. Same with Islamic philosophy, calls it the qalb, the spiritual heart. It's mentioned 122 times across 44 chapters of the Quran. The Sufi tradition taught that the heart is the locus of gnosis, direct spiritual knowledge that operates beyond rational comprehension, and the mind is a tool the heart uses, not the other way around. Orthodox Christianity calls it the nous, translated sometimes as the eye of the heart. The Philokalia, a collection of contemplative Christian texts, defines it as the faculty that understands divine truth not by formulating arguments, but by immediate experience. Contemplative practice in this tradition is essentially about bringing the nous back into the heart. The shift from ego-centered to soul-centered consciousness. They called this metanoia. We translate it as repentance. But the literal meaning is a transformation of the nous, a change of the faculty of perception itself. So these traditions, they disagree about almost everything. They agree on this: the mind is not the seat of transformation. There's something beneath the mind, steadier, deeper, closer to what you actually are. And that is where real change begins. There is something deeper in you, in me, in everyone. And that's where real change begins. Viktor Frankl was a psychiatrist. He was also a Holocaust survivor. He spent years in Auschwitz and other Nazi concentration camps. And what he observed there became the foundation of a school of therapy called logotherapy. What Frankl noticed in the camps was this: the mind broke down. The mind broke down under conditions of systematic dehumanization, starvation, terror, the thinking mind. The instrument, the manifestation tradition asks you to rely on collapsed. People went into apathy. They lost the capacity to think clearly. The mental apparatus was overwhelmed. But in some people, something persisted. Was not optimism, not positive thinking, something that Frankl called the last human freedom, the ability to choose one's response to circumstances regardless of the circumstances. He wrote, everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, the choose one's attitude in any given circumstances. That isn't mental technique. The mind was shattered. What persisted was something below the mind, what Frankl called the noetic dimension, the soul's capacity to find meaning even when the cognitive apparatus has been destroyed. In his most subversive insight, the one that most directly inverts, the manifesting premise is this: it did not really matter what we expected from life. What mattered was what life expected from us. The soul doesn't project desires onto reality and wait it to comply. The soul listens for what reality is asking of it. That's the opposite of orientation, and it's the orientation that actually produces something durable. So, what does it look like to start from the soul instead of the mind? It doesn't start with positive thoughts. It starts with honest ones. The first move, your first move, isn't to tell yourself everything is fine, or that abundance is flowing towards you, or that a version of you who has what you want is already real. The first move is to see clearly, without flinching, without self-pity, what's actually happening now. In you, around you, because the soul can work with reality. It cannot work with fantasy. You have constructed to avoid reality. The Stoic Evening Review, the Buddhist practice of clear seeing. St. Augustine, deep down, self-reflecting. The Socratic injunction to know yourself, the monastic tradition of self-examination. Every serious tradition of transformation begins with honest perception, not optimistic projection. Truth first, transformation follows. Not because honesty feels good, it often doesn't, but because it puts you in contact with what's actually there. And the soul, unlike the mind, can orient itself toward what's actually there. It can find meaning in it. It can choose a response to it. It can grow through it. The mind can only work with the story it's been given. The soul can work with the truth. I want to be clear about what I'm not saying. I'm not saying the mindset doesn't matter. It does. I do mindset. I work with the mind. We need the mind every single day. The mind is a great tool. The Stoics were right about that. The quality of your interpretations shapes the quality of your experience. What I'm saying is that the manifesting tradition has misidentified the source of that power. It's not the mind. The mind is loud, is reactive, contradictory, and downstream of forces it didn't create and can't fully see everything. The soul is quieter, it's harder to access, it requires something that manifestation tradition is structurally unable to ask for, honestly, about what's actually happening, willingness to sit with difficulty, and the recognition that you are not the author of reality. You are a participant in it. And that's not diminishment. That's actually the beginning of something real. In the next video, I want you to get into what it actually looks like to work from the soul, not as an abstract idea, but as a practice. What the traditions prescribe, what the evidence supports, and why it's harder than affirmations and more durable, solid. If this resonated with you, I would encourage you to share it with someone who's been stuck on the manifesting wheel, not to argue with them, just to offer another frame. Or even to you to just subscribe to the channel. Just meditate about it. And if you want to go deeper, we're building something here. A community of people who take this seriously, who are willing to do the harder work to build something really big, but based on solid things. I have a link put down below. You can click. I'm going to send you to a newsletter to a community, to the order. And I want to see you there because we're building something unique and we're building something that is going to achieve big things, massive things, but based on something solid, way solid. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.